you some of the contrary evidence, some of the actual solid research that I think has been done that actually contradicts some of the claims that are made in the popular literature. And then I want to talk about some of the implications, and I have a few concluding remarks. So, what is the net generation? And if you look at the writings on this, it's actually varies considerably, but more or less there's some, I think, general consensus that roughly 1982, people who were born after 1982 that's considered the net generation. Some people talk about a little bit earlier, 1980, some it's a little bit later, but 1982 seems to be somewhere in the middle of the where people are suggesting this generation begins. But it's more than a generational label. It's not just isn't only being used to describe a generation. It's being used to describe. In a sense, it's almost like a movement, a trend, or a perspective. Because when you use the term net generation nowadays, you're implying that this generation has a whole set of characteristics. So the question is, who cares? Why is this an issue? And I already mentioned this. I think the reason it's important is that the characteristics that are being assigned to this generation are potentially have significant impact on what we do here in education and also in many other facets of society. And just to give you a sense of, if you haven't read any of the books and articles that have been written on this topic, just to give you a sense of some of the hype that there is around the net generation. These are just 5 of the more well-known books that have come out recently, and there are many others, and there's many articles in journals and magazines, mostly in the popular, what we call the popular press. But one of the biggest and most, I think, well-known proponents of the idea of the net generation is Don Tapscott, a Canadian. And I feel like I'm picking on him, but I'm not. He happens to be one of the most well-known ones, and he actually, I think, coined the term the net generation in his first book, which came out in 1998, called Growing Up Digital. His most recent book, Grown Up Digital, which just came out this year, carries on from that. And I just want to give you a sense of what he is saying. Oh, it's going to work this time. Okay.
Canada's education system needs an overhaul, and a crisis is emerging in our schools and universities. The internet is a new medium of human communications that enables learning and knowledge sharing, and a new generation of youth have grown up digital, and they learn best through collaboration and through discovery. But our schools are based on an old model that's one-way and teacher-focused and one-size-fits-all, where the student is isolated in the learning process, and where kids learn how to memorize facts and perform well on tests. So here's the question. How can we change the learning experience, and in doing so, reinvent education for relevance and effectiveness for a 21st century? If you have a great answer to this question, just click on grownupdigital.com for a chance to win additional prizes, including a $1,000 scholarship towards your own lifelong learning project.
So that's just one example of the kind of hype around the net generation. And it's not that anything he's saying in there is that I think we probably all agree that we need to make sure that our education system isn't one-way transmission of content, and that students aren't just memorizing facts. But what concerns me is he's suggesting all these changes based on evidence that doesn't really exist, or at least he hasn't demonstrated conclusively that it does exist. And he's making these claims based not on the needs of a specific group of learners who happen to be in one or other program, but an entire generation. So he's saying that this entire generation needs to learn in a specific way. And I think that's dangerous. There's more of Tapscott. I put that there in case the actual YouTube video didn't work. But let me just go on to some other ones. Now, Oblinger and Oblinger are educators who have strong credentials as researchers and administrators. So, and they're not really, their hype is not really as strident, and it may, it may not really be, may not fall into the category of hype. But what concerns me about their work, if you look at this quote, they say that only by understanding the net generation can colleges and universities create learning environments that optimize their strengths and minimize their weaknesses. Technology has changed the net generation just as it has now changed higher education, which is not, again,